Gupta mit drinne gewohnt hätte. In der J1-Wohnung war übrigens zur gleichen Zeit wie Abred auch Selina und hat ein Video vom Balkon gepostet. Ich weiß natürlich nicht, ob die Handabdrücke auch von ihr stammen. Ich hab's aber geografisch geprüft. In Richtung Mekka wurde da jedenfalls nicht gebetet.
Ich schwöre bei Allah, meinem...
So, Zeit sammeln.
Oh.
Gott, ich gehe freiwillig in die Hölle. Okay, kein Problem. Feuer wird es mit Feuer bekämpft.
Übrigens, in der Türkei hat sich Upgrade auch schon Wohnungen mit anderen geteilt.
Ansonsten sind wir jetzt wieder in einer neuen Airbnb. Hier ist übrigens mein Zimmer. Ich kann euch die Airbnb mal... Hier ist noch ein Zimmer. Hier ist das Zimmer von Reddit.
Ach, und mein Punkt ist, by the way, nicht, dass er sich mit anderen was teilen muss, sondern die Tatsache, dass er es nicht zugeben kann, weil er reich aussehen will. Aber jetzt kommt der Knüller. Der Multitrilliardär Upred hat seinen Anteil damals scheinbar nicht mal bezahlt und bis heute auch nicht seine Schulden bei Champ beglichen.
Und jetzt kommen wir zu Upred und meine Herausforderung an dich. Upred, der allerechte Multimillionär, habe ich kennengelernt. Ich war mit ihm gemeinsam in Istanbul, habe eine Airbnb gebucht. Diese Airbnb habe ich bezahlt. Er meinte, er wird mir das Geld geben, weil er gerade nicht über Internet bezahlen kann. Dies, das, bla bla bla. Warum auch immer, weil wenn...
Das höre ich gerne.
My entitled neighbor hits my car and then runs off, stating that he will never go through insurance to pay for the damages he did to my car, forcing me to call the cops. And I'm honestly still blown away by this situation entirely. Here's what happened. Okay, so this took place several years ago. I work in a group home for adults with special needs, and the building I work in is just a regular bungalow in a residential area. Parking isn't ideal because all we have is one narrow driveway. So if the driveway is free when you get there, then fine. But if someone is already parked there when you arrive, you end up blocking them in if you park in the driveway. Now this is not ideal, as we often leave on errands for the residents during our shift. So when the driveway is occupied, we park on the street in front of the house. And this is perfectly legal. I live in Canada in an area that gets tons of snow in the winter. So the only rules about parking are that you cannot block a fire hydrant. And from the 15th of October to the 15th of April, you can't park on the streets from midnight to 7 o'clock in the morning. And this is also so the snowplows can do their job in the event of a storm. All other times of day are fair game, and anything in the summer is acceptable. Now, my situation took place on a sunny afternoon in late June, so it was perfectly legal for me to park there on the street. So I'm at work doing my job when there's a knock on the door. My coworker answered, and it turned out it was the guy who lives across the street. He and his wife were heading out of town and were traveling in their truck, which had a trailer hitched to the back. My car was parked on the street across from him, and as he was backing out of his driveway, he backed his trailer right into my front driver's side wheel well. So I go out to inspect the damage, and he's already mad, saying how frustrating it is that the people in our house are always parked in the street, that it makes it hard for him to get out of his driveway and all this other garbage. Now, mind you, this is the first time he has said anything to any of us, but honestly, whatever. I didn't say anything to him, but I just looked at my car to see the damage, and it was pretty bad. In fact, it ended up costing $2,000 to repair it. So I just say, let's just exchange insurance information, and that is quite literally the only thing I've said to him up to this point. Well, when I said that, he gets very angry. He starts yelling and says he refuses to go through insurance, saying it's my fault for being parked in the street, and he'll have to pay for the damage. But only if I take my car to this guy that he knows. His wife then adds that they're doing me a favor by even telling me. They could have just driven off. Well, technically yes, but that's actually illegal. So no, you weren't doing me any favors. Again, I don't say much, and I just reiterate that I'd like to go through the insurance. Well, this guy flat out refuses, which is also incredibly illegal. So I say to him, fine, I'm just gonna call the police then. And at this point, he says he's not sticking around, and he and his wife actually drive off. And it was then that I absolutely called the police. The cops arrive and see that I'm parked legally and say there's no reason he should have been able to back out without hitting me. Now, here's perhaps the most annoying part of all of this. They track him down the next day and come back to let me know that they've spoken to him. It turns out he's a retired guard for the local jail, and according to the officer who did the follow-up, apparently he seems like a good guy. He's quite nice. And well, yes, I'm sure he was nice to the cop. But me, the rather small female civilian, not so much. Because this cop literally tries to convince me to not go through insurance. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on right now? He's part of your club, so he gets a free pass for being a jerk? No thank you. This guy verbally attacks me for his mistake. Then he drove away from the scene of an accident, so they need to fine him. Don't try to make this easier on him. He's a jerk. Well, I went through insurance, and my insurance covered 100% of the cost and deemed it all not my fault, which was a relief as it means my premiums were not affected. And you know what? I'm pretty sure cops have to issue a ticket when a motor vehicle collision occurs. So I'm not really sure what happens with a neighbor, but I'm guessing he received some sort of fine because I know I definitely didn't. Man, this story really pisses me off. Imagine parking your car on the street and then someone not only hits your car, but then refuses to go through insurance for it and also decides to run away. And I don't know about you, but that is definitely the definition of a hit and run. Even though there was like a conversation beforehand, these people hit your car and then they ran off. So the fact that the cops didn't do anything more serious is absolutely insane in my opinion. These are such crooked cops, like oh my god, that is so unacceptable. So truly, I'm blown away by these cops' behavior because this is not a good look in the slightest. And the fact that you had to even argue your case in the first place, in my opinion, is absolutely unacceptable. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Would I be the jerk if I told my housemate that his OCD and house rules are making our lives a living nightmare? Because right now, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my partner and I moved into a house that we share with two other guys ages 19 and 25. Now, I'm generally tidy, and I've shared a house for many years, but the 19-year-old male has been overly strict and passive-aggressive since we moved in. When we arrived, he tried to give us just one cupboard and just one fridge shelf for both of us to use, despite the fact that there were 6 cupboards and 5 shelves. When we pushed back, he got annoyed, and eventually we took space for ourselves, but he retaliated by throwing away communal items, which might lead to extra charges for all of us. The house is spotless, yet this guy is constantly complaining. He says that we can't leave wet sponges in the sink, and they have to be in my cupboard despite the damp smell. I'm also not allowed to use the drying rack for any of the plates. I can't leave leftovers in the kitchen, but also can't have more fridge space. He also suggested storing food in my room, which I refused. He complained about a bin being half full while we were out for 2 days, and yet he refused to empty it himself. Once, he sent a long rant about a single crumb in the kitchen. His messages are long-winded and often feel targeted towards me and my partner, even though the other 25-year-old is messier than all of us. I eventually snapped and I told him that he needs to adjust his tone, but he claimed that these rules are due to his OCD, but they are excessive, and I'm tired of being hounded all the time. We've also tried to be accommodating. No personal belongings in the communal areas, no guests, and keeping everything spotless. And yet still, the constant messaging and lack of compromise is honestly exhausting. I want to say to him, hey, I've tried to be accommodating, but your constant passive aggressiveness and your strict rules are becoming ridiculous. Our home is very clean, and it's unfortunate if it doesn't meet your standards due to your OCD. However, you can't expect the rest of us to cater to your every need, especially when it comes to communal space. When you sign up for a house share, compromise is necessary. I also feel the way that you address me but not my partner or the 25-year-old male that shares the house with us is incredibly sexist and domineering, which I don't appreciate. So please, let's work towards a middle ground. I honestly want to say all this to this guy, but I don't know if I would be the jerk, because right now I really don't know what to do. Yeah, in my opinion, the second anyone's like, you have to follow the rules, my OCD says so. Like at that point, I'm gonna get really angry and very frustrated, because here's the thing, your OCD is your problem, not mine. That is something for him to figure out, and not something that you should be held to as if it's the word of God. Like seriously, the way he's acting is crazy and there's no good excuse for it, because there are people in my life that have OCD, but they never act like this. They have ways of like keeping things in check, and they've taken the steps to like take care of themselves and make it not so much of an issue. But in my opinion, it doesn't seem like your roommate's doing that at all. Instead, he's like externalizing it and being like, wow, you have got to follow my rules. Like, is this guy the landlord for some reason? Like, what's going on? So no, you would not be the jerk for telling this guy exactly how it is, because his behavior, in my opinion, is completely out of line. Am I the jerk for telling my sister no after she once again asked me for money? Because after funding so many projects that she's given up on, I now feel very badly about telling her no. And at this point, I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my younger sister and I are both in our 20s.
You're dead meat!
I moved out, I went to school, and started off well for myself. I found myself a 2-bedroom apartment, and I am basically well off. I'm now married, and my partner and I recently welcomed a baby. Because I wanted to be a stay-at-home not bringing in any money, and I'm staying at home 100% of the time to bond with our baby before they go to kindergarten. My partner can afford to take care of the bills without any kind of help, and if push comes to shove, we'll use my emergency fund. Well, this is where the issues start. My sister still lives with my mom, and before we welcomed our baby, I was basically my sister's bank. Whatever she needed, I would pay for, and she would start something new only to quit again after a while. Over the course of the years, I felt taken advantage of, but I would do it anyways. She is my sister, and I love her, and I honestly hope that the next thing would stick. I told her I couldn't do it anymore because babies are pricey, and she had my mom and dad pay for stuff. Recently, she started working at a low-paying job, and she mentioned needing money for another project yet again. But I told her that I couldn't do it, and my parents delayed paying for it. I felt bad and thought I'd give her part of my savings, till I heard she got herself a new iPhone. Now, at this point, I flipped out because her phone was in perfectly good shape, and she certainly didn't need a $1,000 phone. She thinks that I'm being a jerk because I had said I would give her my savings. But why should I use my own money when she's getting herself a new phone? I told her if it was that important, she would have paid for it herself. But then she went on about how she doesn't earn that much money. Part of me wants to just give it to her because then my parents won't have to fund her, but a bigger part of me is upset because they are enabling her, and I don't want to enable her out of my own pocket. I had to pay for my own school and juggle work and school to save money, so I really think this is unfair. Part of the issue is also that she doesn't look for me or text me unless I text her first. Now, I have addressed this, and her reasoning is always about, well, I was about to, but then months can go by, and when I text her that, suddenly a response will come in. So truly, am I the jerk for telling my sister no? Because right now I feel really bad and I don't know what to do. No, you're not the jerk for saying no, but I do think you're a fool if you let this continue. Seriously, it can't be more obvious that your sister is using you for money. She literally only comes to you whenever she needs something, and she doesn't like message you or text you outside of that. And that, in my opinion, is like textbook manipulation and just her taking advantage of you. So no, you're not the jerk for telling your sister no, and in my opinion, it's time to maybe stand up for yourself, because if you're not careful, this behavior absolutely will continue. Am I the jerk for not giving my dad the birthday gift that he asked for? Because right now, my parents are in a big argument over it, and at this point, I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So last week was my dad's birthday, and I usually like to get him something nice. My parents immigrated to Western Europe when I was a small child so that they could provide us with a better life, even though they earn minimum wage. 5 years ago, I graduated from the best engineering university in the country, so I've been fortunate to have a good financial situation. I enjoy spoiling them as a way to thank them for their support on their birthdays and at Christmas. For example, last year I knew my mom wanted to go on a trip with her friends, but didn't have the money to do it, so I covered the cost of her flight and hotel. This year I asked my dad what he wanted for his birthday, and being a simple man, he said he wanted a new vape. After thinking it over, I decided against buying him a vape. I've tried to help him quit several times, but have accepted that it's unlikely to happen. However, I don't feel right about actively supporting his addictions. So instead, I got him a new tablet because I knew that he was still using his old one, which had a broken screen. And the tablet ended up being a lot more expensive than the vape. Well, when I gave him the gift, he seemed really agitated. He took me aside and expressed his gratitude, but questioned why I chose such an expensive item instead of the cheaper one that he wanted. He acknowledged that the tablet was nice, but mentions that he needs to buy a new vape this year, and he anticipates a big fight with my mom if he buys the one he likes. He then asked me to return the tablet and exchange it for the vape. Well, I told him that I was sorry, but I just couldn't do it. I can't be the one paying for the toxic chemicals that are slowly harming you. You can ask for anything else, but I can't provide that. We then had a small argument over it, and then we went back inside to celebrate. Well, today, my younger sister, who still lives at home, messaged me to say that mom and dad are fighting over dad's new vape. She then asked me why I was being so stubborn and didn't just get it for him. I explained my reasons to her, but she thought that I was being unreasonable since he was going to get the vape anyways. Unfortunately, it seems they will be fighting about this for a couple of weeks. I've been reflecting on my decision for a while, and I'm now starting to have doubts. I want him to be healthy, but I can't help but wonder if my choice was selfish. He still has the vape, and it seems I'm the only one who benefited because I managed to keep my conscience clear. So am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? Okay, maybe I'm wrong here, but I really don't think you're the jerk jerk here because I completely understand your reasoning. You don't like the fact that he's vaping and you feel like this is a horrible addiction and it's ruining his life. So you decided, okay, I'm just gonna get you a tablet instead and that's that. So from that perspective, I understand why you did it and I don't think you're in the wrong for choosing to do that. You don't want to support that addiction. And sure, he got the vape that he wanted either way, but it didn't come out of your pocket. And that, in my opinion, is a big deal. Because sure, he can try and guilt trip you and be like, oh, I'm gonna get it anyways and it's gonna cause a big argument. You need to buy this for me. And it's like, no, I'm sorry, that's not gonna happen. You still have the choice of whether you want to buy it or not, and I'm not responsible for if you do buy it. Like, that kind of reasoning from your dad is so twisted, it's not even funny. So no, I don't think you're the jerk here, because it really seems like your intentions were in the right place. Am I the jerk for telling tourists not to park near my house after they parked their SUV literally a foot away from my house? Because right now, I'm incredibly frustrated, and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my parents' house is located in a Roman historical ruins, and is considered a tourist visiting location. It's a long viaduct, and part of it runs like 30 feet away from my house. Well, this family of tourists with their kids decided they wanted to sightsee these ruins, and many tourists do every year as well. So honestly, so far so good. The thing is, they parked their SUV like a foot away from my parents' house, and this is on the road, by the way. I was gardening at the time, and I heard them all talking going out of the vehicle, so I went out to them and I asked if they came out to visit our family, to which the father answered that no, they just want to see the ruins. Well, I told him if that's the case, then this isn't a parking spot, to which he answered it's only going to take half a minute and then they'll leave, even though as a side note, it wasn't half a minute. He then tried to say that it's not bothering anyone if it's on the road, so I told him that a road isn't a parking place. He then said that he understands, and then turned away to his business to show that he was ignoring me. I told him that it's clear he doesn't understand, but whatever, and then I returned home. So right now, I really feel like a Karen, but it's also the fact that most tourists park outside our village entirely, or they go far enough into the ruins as to not be parked where people live. But he decided that my fence was good at parking. It honestly doesn't really bother anyone, because it's actually very boring here as it is. But it's the fact that he didn't try to understand my perspective at all that really, truly annoyed me. He could have asked if there's a parking spot around, or if there's anywhere they can stand around that isn't a living area. I would have answered him, and in retrospect, even told him that he can stay off the road away from my house, but he's still stuck to his own agenda. So truly, am I the jerk in this situation? What should I do? Okay, I don't know the specifics of like where you live, or like the laws when it comes to parking on a public road, but from my perspective, as someone who does live in a country where yes, you typically can park on the side of the road, even if it is in front of somebody else's house, like in my opinion, I really do think that you are the jerk here. Sure, they could have parked anywhere else, but guess what? Just because they parked in front of your house doesn't mean that they're like taking a shot at you. And you're trying to argue, wow, you shouldn't park in front of my house. But the counter argument is literally, oh, you mean the public road? The road that is literally available to anybody to use and do whatever they want on? You mean that road? Like seriously, this is not a private driveway, and from the sounds of it, it's not like they're parking on your front yard. So seriously, like what's the problem here? They were not bothering you, they weren't even on your property, so for you to be like, wow, you need to move, you're being inconsiderate. It's like, no, they're actually not doing anything wrong. They're parking off to the side of a public road, and unless there's some kind of restriction that like blocks people from parking in that area, then in my opinion, these people are well within their right to park wherever they want. My parents absolutely hate my boyfriend simply because he has a 3-year-old son, and they have now chosen to say that they will never support him if we ever get married. And at this point, I am so hurt that I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my boyfriend and I have been dating for almost a year now. I am extremely happy with him, and he treats me so well. It's been an absolute dream being with him. He's the perfect man, and I can't see my life without him. And our relationship has been amazing. A few weeks into us talking, I had a feeling that we would be official, so I told my parents about him, and also told them that he has a 3-year-old son. Well, they were initially stumped, and told me that they aren't the biggest fans, but they were overall kind about it, and said that it's my life so I can choose what I want to do. I listened to them, and I kept it in my mind, but I decided to continue our relationship. After they realized that I wasn't anything with him, they became much more cold and incredibly rude to me. They told me they don't understand why I told them if they were going to say they don't approve, and I just decided to continue the relationship. They said they'll never give us their blessing to marry, they'll never have us at events together, and they're mourning the loss of their relationship with their daughter and all this other stuff. They have also told me that I'm straining their marriage. They've sacrificed so much for me just to throw it in their face, and now they're even making rude comments by calling me stepmom in a condescending tone. Initially, I did try my best to have them meet and open a conversation for us to talk about it. I would be open and tell them where I'm going with him, if I'm staying at his place, or where I got my flowers from. For reference, he's gotten me flowers every month since we started dating. But eventually, they told me they don't want to hear about him or see him. So I stopped telling them where I'm going completely. I spend much less time at home because of attention, silent treatment, or rude behavior. It feels like I'm lose-lose telling them everything and trying to find a solution or just leaving them alone. I currently live with them, and I'm saving up to move out and be fully financially independent. In fact, they've already thrown finances in my face, mentioning that they pay my insurance and I live under their roof, which I completely agree. So the best thing to do would be to move out and at least get rid of one argument they might have. There's constant tension in the house with them, and whenever they seem okay, it's because I just go straight to work and home. Every other month, we seem to argue about all of this, but I've honestly become so tired. The arguments are full of harsh remarks, as well as condescending comments about how I make stupid decisions, how I'm ruining the family, and they will never accept us and never attempt to. They've also said when our family doesn't like someone, they will just completely outcast them, and that's just how it is. So it's my decision to date him or be a part of the family. They then go on a list of all the family members they avoid because they don't like them or their partner. My mom also mentions her personal issues from the past, from when she grew up with having divorced parents, stating that this will not allow her to accept my relationship or be involved in my life. My parents have an us versus them mentality with the rest of my family and credit all of their issues to that. When I have spoken up about how that may not be the healthiest thing and how it makes no sense to love me unconditionally and then do the same to me, I'm just told that's the way our family works. I have tried many times to have a conversation, and I have been outspoken about how they don't talk to me to actually discuss things, but rather they just want to yell at me. I've said I don't feel comfortable at home, considered, or seen as a person. All of that to then lead to more accusing, yelling, and bullying. At this point, I know I haven't treated them the best recently because I have built so much resentment for them as well, and I would rather not, but at the same time, I can't try to be happy in the house knowing their kindness and love feels conditional. What should I do? Okay, let me just say first and foremost, your parents are absolutely awful. The way they're treating you is not normal, and the fact that they're trying to be like, oh, this is how family acts. If we don't like them, we cut them off. Like, that is not how it works at all. I can understand if there's some kind of, like, actual issue going on, or, like, some recurring bad behavior that would make someone, like, cut off a family member, but for your parents to be like, wow, we don't like their partner, we're never talking to them ever again. Like, that really is so extreme, it's not even funny. And that is not the way a normal family acts. So for your parents to be like, oh, if your partner has a kid, we automatically hate him and we will never accept him. That doesn't say anything about you or your partner, but instead it says a lot about them. Because I really am convinced they will do this to anybody that you try to date. Anyone you try to bring into your family, they will get the same type of treatment. These people just don't sound like they can ever be happy. And in my opinion, it's not your job to figure that out for them. So truly, I hope this works out for you, and I also hope you're able to move out and move on with your life, because your parents sound like a nightmare to live with. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.
Thunderclap! What? Yeah! Yeah!
My entitled, spoiled, rotten older son is an absolute nightmare to be around, as he assumes that everything should be given to him at the drop of a hat. And now, after I told him no, he goes into an absolute rampage and starts a path of destruction, causing me and my neighbors to call the police just to have him arrested. Here's what happened. For context, I'm a 35-year-old female, and I have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born, and his father was very bad to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s, and my ex-mother-in-law ended up taking my son into another state and filing for custody. She went to a state that has grandparents' rights as ours didn't. I fought her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10 years old. I see my oldest son only during the summer and the holidays. I finally got the court case moved to our local court, and the judge said that I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex-mother-in-law made a huge deal that my son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge went with it so he could finish high school in an environment he was familiar with. My ex-mother-in-law has ruined my son, by the way, just like she did her own. She's given him anything and everything he's ever wanted or asked for. She's taught him no respect and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way. So in turn, my son is loud, violent, and all around sad to be around. So he came up to visit during Halloween and showed his awful self. My husband's mom leaves with us, and she isn't well. She's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son, and she does that so that I can help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny, and respectful. We've taught him that you don't expect anything unless you work for it. I went and picked up my oldest, and his attitude started right away because his phone died and the charger I had in the truck didn't fit his phone. He wanted me to get off the interstate and buy him an overpriced one from a truck stop or something. I told him no, I'd get him one when we get into town, and that next time he needs to remember to bring one for the house and the car. I suggested making a packing list ahead of time. Now, my youngest was in the back with his tablet, playing quietly, and my oldest realized that the tablet was plugged into a car charger. He asked his younger brother for the charger, and I told him it's an Apple charger. It won't work with your Android. My oldest said, "You don't know that, shut up." The next thing I know, he's forcibly taking the Apple charger, and he's trying to fit it into his phone. And when it didn't work, he threw it into the back seat of the truck. My youngest just plugged his tablet back up without another word, but I told my oldest son that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Fast forward to today, and my oldest son is still yelling at me because I made him wait, and he badmouthed me to his grandma. I left to go to the office, as did my husband, and my mother-in-law was going to take my youngest son to the tree trail for Halloween. She asked my older son if he wanted to go, and he told her to kick rocks. My husband told my oldest son not to speak to her like that, and I knew after that that trouble was brewing. I just didn't know how bad it really would be. Apparently, my mother-in-law and my youngest son went to the tree trail, and my older son called my mother-in-law to tell her he wanted some parties, which is also known as Carl's Jr. My mother-in-law told him that there was food at home, and that it would be a while before she could get any. My oldest son told her that she needed to bring it to him right now. So my mother-in-law told him to either eat what was there at the house or to wait. And wouldn't you guess it, my older son started cussing at her and hung up the phone on her. My mother-in-law then called me, and I told her not to reward his bad behavior. I told her we had plans to go out anyways later to eat, and that he would be just fine waiting. When my mother-in-law gets home, she tries to open the door, and her keys won't work. My older son comes to the door and tells her that he's angry and doesn't want her in the house, so he locked her out. He told her to wait outside until he either felt like opening the door or until I came home. My mother-in-law told him to open the door right now. She then called me crying, and I absolutely went off. I called my son and I told him that he does not make the rules in my house, and that he was supposed to go by them, and that he would be punished if he didn't open the door. At this point, he really thought I was playing, so I left the office and went home, and this is when disaster struck. I opened the door and my older son was there on the other side. My mother-in-law and my younger son had been waiting in her car, and my older son was blocking the doorway, saying that he told my mother-in-law to keep outside, and that this was her punishment for telling him no. I told him to move right now. I tried to push past him, and he pushed me back outside, threatening to lock all of us out. I went to go inside again, and he put his hand on my face and pushed me back out of my house. At that point, I had had enough, and I told him, "That's it, I'm calling the police." He didn't think I was serious, but I actually did call the cops. I told the dispatcher that my oldest son was refusing to let me into my own home, and he had just put his hands on me. And once I said this, my older son goes into an absolute pure rage. He comes out of the door screaming profanities, as well as threatening me. He tries to take my phone from me, and the lady tells me that she'll send someone right away. I mean, I had to literally wrestle wrestle with my older son just to keep him from breaking my phone. At that point, he then tries to go after my youngest son, and he actually tells him that he hates him, and that my youngest son somehow caused his life to be awful ever since he was born, somehow claiming that he is the only one that should have me as a mother. My oldest son also said that he was the only true son, since he was born first from my first marriage, which is absolute garbage. My mother-in-law then locks my younger son in her car, and the older son proceeds to kick, punch, and crack the windows, as well as the windshield of her car. The older son goes after my mother-in-law just as my husband pulls up. He's telling my mother-in-law that this is her fault, and that she just needed to do what he said. My husband tries to restrain him, but my older son is screaming that he will have my husband arrested. The police come and they immediately take over and restrain my son and put him into the back of the van. My husband and I explained the situation, and I told the officer that my ex-mother-in-law had shared custody with my son. So the officer calls up my ex-mother-in-law and tells her exactly what's happening. He puts her on speakerphone, and she immediately puts blame on us, saying that we provoked him and that we are the abusive ones. The officer told her that didn't seem to be the case, as a neighbor had come forward and said that she had called 911, plus had a security camera that showed the entire thing. My ex-mother-in-law then jumps to saying that the police here can't do anything with my older son, as he's a resident of another state, which is again absolute garbage. The cop tells my ex-mother-in-law that this is obviously not the case, and it seems like my older son needs to learn how to be more in control of his emotions. The officer hangs up, and my ex-mother-in-law immediately calls me. I put her on speakerphone again, because I know she's not the smartest thing to ever walk the earth. My ex-mother-in-law then said that if my older son was arrested, then it would prove that I'm a bad mom, thus proving and justifying what he had said and done, especially when it comes to him saying that he's the true son. She also verified this mentality by saying that he was my only heir, as he was my first son and from my first marriage, claiming that divorce is a sin. I told her that's not how it works. I told her I'm tired of him taking my house over and trying to hurt the people that I loved. Long story short, he spent 3 days in juvenile lockup before having a hearing in front of a judge. The judge asked me what I wanted to do, so I requested that my older son be sent to a group home. My ex-mother-in-law fought the entire way, but had absolutely no ground to stand on, because both officers and my neighbor gave statements. Now my ex-mother-in-law is saying I'm ruining his life, and that I'm a terrible parent, which is honestly just ridiculous. The older son in this story is absolutely a nightmare. I mean, what in the world is wrong with him? This ex-mother-in-law absolutely did a number on this kid. It blows my mind that she had any kind of right to try and claim any kind of custody over this kid, even in the first place. And then she goes ahead and basically taints this kid's mind and turns him into this absolute nightmare of a human being. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous, and it's really unfortunate. So good for the original poster standing up for what's right and doing the right thing. You protected yourself and your family when it counted the most. And if I was in your shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for sending a Karen to prison? I am a 27-year-old male and a father to 2 girls. We'll call them Annie and Amy. That's not their real names. And I was at the mall shopping with my sweet little girls when a woman who looks like the very description of a demon spawn started asking me where it is I found the dollhouse that I currently had. I responded by saying that it's actually in the aisle labeled toys. She said thank you, and then she went off on her way. Now, my kids are always in front of me, so I can never let them out of my sight, and I have disciplined them well to behave in public places. We're Asians who migrated here from the Philippines, but we look very much Japanese, since my parents are actually Japanese, who lived in the Philippines and later migrated to San Francisco, which is where we currently reside. This will be important later. So when I was about to pay for my shopping, this woman started walking towards me with the security guard saying, "That's him, sir. He stole that dollhouse from my shopping cart." I got a little nervous as I am confused. First she asked me where this dollhouse was from, and now she's telling them that I stole it from her, which just doesn't make any sense. So the security pulled me out by my sleeve, out to the parking lot, with my daughters following behind with a nervous look on their face. So I asked if I can reason with the security, and apparently this Karen had already called the cops beforehand. The cops showed up, and they interviewed both sides. So I told the cops, "Officer, I didn't steal that from her. She asked me where I got the dollhouse, and I simply pointed to the toy section. There is even security footage that they can look up to prove my innocence." The entitled Karen basically then called me a liar, saying people like me steal everything from us. And apparently, all because I'm Asian, I've apparently stolen their homes and their jobs, and I should just go back to my home country. And at this point, my 7-year-old daughter is clinging to me tightly, and my 4-year-old is crying, wanting to go home. So after a few moments of reviewing the footage, the cops pretty much knows the entire story. We then proceed to paying for our stuff after that, and the cops asked me if I wanted to press charges, and I said yes. We then find out that this entitled Karen was under the influence of some illegal substance. The security apologized, since he dragged me out without even asking or reasoning with me first. Instead, he just jumped to some kind of conclusion. A few hours later, I decided to go back into the store to buy the latest God of War game, which I will be gifting to my nephew this December. It was the afternoon at this point, so the store is mildly crowded. To my surprise, there are only 2 copies left. I even met this guy while we were both looking at the game, and he said something to the effect of, "Oh, are you gaming for the weekend?" And so I just smiled and nodded to add to the conversation, since I'm not really a talkative guy for the most